After we posted yesterday's video with Gino, a lot of you reached out to me and asked for more information. You were as fascinated as I am usually with his thoughts and ideas. And so we decided to make this episode a bit special and make it a much longer format. So without further ado, here's my full conversation with Professor Gino Yu from the Hong Kong Polytech University. First time we met back in 2011, that you were working on a bunch of consciousness stuff, which didn't mean much to me back then. Yeah. But I've always had the term back in my mind, and so whenever I come across a piece of literature or experiments in that field, I think of you.
Oh, wow, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
And for me, it's been wonderful seeing your progress. I mean, when you first came here as a visiting scholar, I guess, you were working on a small world at HKUST, I think, and then you kind of went off, and then you became this kind of digital nomad entrepreneur. I've been kind of promoting your way of living as well, too, which is kind of like the young generation coming out now, where not owning a car, I don't have to have a place, I can just live with my optimally designed 64 items.
Yeah, that's the number.
Actually, when I was 25 years old, I traveled around the world, and you see different cultures, and two things happen when you travel around the world, especially when you're broke. I only had $1,000 cash, no credit card. This is in 1989. Two things. One is you meet different people with completely different cultures, and somehow you're able to connect with them. So what is the commonality in man? So that's one of the things to look at. And then the second is when you just go with an open mind, and you probably know this, which is what motivates your way of living, is that magic happens. You bump into people and all this serendipities happen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All there is to everything in the universe right now, if you look at the influences on the cells of your body, assuming that consciousness is embodied, and the physical is all we can, and the material is all we can really talk about, with clarity. So if I say this is a Greek chair, this is a glass with a black straw and ice in it, you know what I mean, because we have a shared experience. Yeah. But if I talked about how I feel about my daughter right now, etc., you're like, huh? Really? Let me think.
Right.
You can project, but you don't know this glass. And so all there is to everything in the universe right now, from the perspective of your awareness, is what you know from your senses, which is literally this staff club that we're in right now. There's how your body feels, whether you're hungry, thirsty, or have to go to the bathroom, the taste of the fry and everything. And there's what you know from thought. And that's everything in the universe right now. Does this knife exist? Yeah? How do we know the knife exists?
Yeah, this is right. Commonly.
Does Switzerland exist right now? Does it? Well, arguably, you know of its existence from thought.
Yeah.
And so everything in the universe right now, influencing your body, is in one of those three categories. What's physically around us right now.
Like the glass, right?
Yeah. There's the feeling, the experience of this moment, everything on this window. There's how your body feels, the internal processes.
So kind of outside of me, inside of me.
Yeah, and what you know from thought.
Okay, yeah.
Right. And if you look at every cell in the body, what's influencing it? Yeah. There's what's here, there's the internal things, and there's what you're thinking. Now, there's a 5-stage process of development. And it looks like, I'll go through the 5 stages. You kind of bounce around a little bit, but have a good sense of where you're at. And the thing about this with the physiology is that although our beliefs and experiences are different, the underlying physiological mechanisms are the same. So we're both having lunch right now. Eventually, as this food goes through my digestive system, I'll probably have to take a at some time where the remains of this meal will leave my body, similar to you. So although our tastes, our experiences, and everything are completely different, the underlying physiological mechanisms are similar, and they're objective and they're measurable. Mm-hmm. So in stage 1, what happens is your parents lay their conditioning on you, the education system lay their conditioning on you, and then society lay their conditioning on you. And so you start building this mental worldview, and then experiences bind these symbols to processes in physiology. And as I explore the world, my understanding expands, but all of these symbols ultimately map to sensations and processes in physiology.
Okay. Yeah.
And so what's happening is the energy system of the body is developing, and the psychology and the psyche are developing. through experience. And so stage 1 is I'm developing the energy system in the physiology and the psyche, but I'm fragmented.
Okay.
That's stage 1. Stage 2 is I look at consensus reality and I say, F all this shit. I'm going all in on one thing. And you've done that. And so you said, hey, what's this thing about houses? What's this thing about property that I own? I'm just going to be, hey, I'm concerned about the environment and all this other stuff, my footprint, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to be tethered to things. I'm just going to keep things small. And so most people would look at you and go, Cédric, you're f***ing nuts, man. Don't you need a place? And then you're like, no, I can do this. And so what you've done is you've gone all in on one thing. Right? And so what happens is when you go on one thing, but your energy, you have your strong beliefs and you're just kind of pushing them really high. And those beliefs are not what consensus reality would say is true. Any true artist, any true entrepreneur has to go away from consensus reality, go into the unknown, find something, and then bring it back. And so stage 2 is I go all in on one thing. So stage 1, the image to think about is an egg and the yolk gradually becoming a chick. That's stage 1. Stage 2 is you just keep pecking on one point. And as long as you keep pecking on one point, what happens is the egg breaks and the chick is born. And the break is the realization that, and the high end of stage 2 and the entry level to stage 3 is the realization that there are bigger forces at work. So it wasn't me. I've just been very lucky. I think I know how things happen, but if you push me really hard, I really don't know how things happen. You go on a high end, and then gradually you can live more and more, just kind of from the peak performance flow state. Now the thing about it is for most people, it's the context that kicks the physiology into a flow state. Why do people drive fast cars? Why do you go skiing? I've got a great job. It's paying for everything. Why do I want another one? I've got a great wife. Why do I? Because I get bored, etc. And then I'm looking for the new thing that's going to kick me into this high energy state. Now the thing is, the energy and the physiology, for many people, it's the context that does that. But the energy is actually generated by how you're breathing and how you're holding your physiology. So if you can maintain that breath and physiology independent of context, your whole relationship with reality changes.
Yep.
If I put this cup here and nobody touches it, it's not going to move. And so for you and your psyche, what's driving action? And so for most people, hey, I like that. Hey, what's that? And so questions and all these other things are just subtle forms of desire versus stillness. And so what has to happen in stage 3 is you have to decouple from the stories and the influences of symbols on the processes of physiology. So you have to let go of the stories and then reconnect underneath all of your stories. At the core of your being is an inner experience that's present within everybody. And the only way I can describe that experience with words is that right here and right now, it's good to be alive. Compared to being dead right now, this is amazing. And so there's a vast reservoir of energy. It's as if your life depended on it, right? And so if you can then connect to that and then decouple from the influences of symbol, that's the mission of stage 3. But it's difficult because to fully decouple from symbol is effectively psychological suicide. To chop off the influences of all of the symbols on the processes of physiology is effectively psychological suicide. And the reason why it's difficult is because it feels like physical suicide, because it's using the same underlying physiological mechanisms that are keeping you alive. And so if you're able to fully decouple from that, then the only thing that's left is what's around you and how your body feels, which is what it was like when you were a baby. Is there a waiter walking by here adjusting the chairs? Is this happening? Is this happening right now?
Looks like it.
How and why is it happening now? And so if you look at it all as one thing, our conversation and the emergence of this, if you then look at it from the point of stillness, your whole relationship with reality changes. And if you start feeling, and because all there is, again, is what you're thinking, there's how your body feels, what's in thought, how your body feels, and the emergence of this. If you bring yourself fully present, there is no thought. And if you realize that all thoughts do is regulate energy in the physiology, and it's about maintaining a high energy state or being able to self-regulate the energy independent of context, and if you realize that, and if you can connect to the innate joy of being as the source of energy to motivate action, if you're connected to joy, the emergence of this is kind of like music, and living life is kind of like dancing. And so can you live life as if you were dancing? Someone just moved a chair. Did you hear that? Yeah. And so if you bring yourself fully present, you'll notice you can't think, but your ability to be hyper aware of everything expands tremendously. Someone's just sipping some soup or something right now too. And so looking at what's showing up here in relation to what you're saying, all as one thing. Okay. And so again, you know that there are bigger forces at work. What is this saying? And so normally people would consider all of these other things noise, but if you look at all of this as signal, then things get really interesting.
I've been thinking about this experiment to go blind for, let's say, a week or something like that. Because I think that a lot of the noise, or my perceived noise, comes from my visual or sensory system. Because I guess that's the one for me that's the hardest to control. And
well,
really just
the issue that you have related to this is exactly what you just said. And your method right now is 你现在在拍，现在录。
现在在拍摄，
对，
还不好意思啊。
is what I just did there, which is control. And for you, the energy system is still tied to control, and you're working towards optimization on the one thing. You know that there are bigger forces at work, but your main focus is that one objective, which is very much stage 2. But you have an appreciation and understanding that there are bigger forces at work, and you have momentary glimpses of it, but you don't realize that's the normal way of things happening. And you don't have the confidence because a lot of the stuff that's underneath that's driving this discipline and control is fear.
Yeah.
And because you're still tied to the symbols and what they represent and what they're doing and who you are. Now the thing for you in relation to what you're doing right now, from an entrepreneurship perspective, and so the workshop I told you that I run on entrepreneurship, innovation, and self-discovery is
elevate? Or
no, it's kind of entrepreneurship as a spiritual path.
Okay.
And so one of the exciting things I'd like to share with you too is I'm working with several groups on doing a fund just to support entrepreneurs where they realize that what they're doing with their company is their spiritual path. So it's a way of, or looking at it from a perspective of personal development. And so metaphysically speaking, how and why do things happen the way they do? So the game that everyone on this planet is playing, everyone, is what's showing up in thought, how does my body feel, and how do things play out in space and time? That's the game that everyone's playing. And if you're laser focused on one thing, as an entrepreneur, then it's literally what's showing up in thought, what are the emotions motivating the action, and as I do something, how does the reality respond, and as the reality responds, how does that make me feel? And it's helping people understand that loop. And what we found is that the success of a startup company or a large corporation correlates to the level of consciousness of the entrepreneur or the management team. And what I mean by their level of consciousness is their ability to maintain presence. And so as the shit is hitting the fan and all this other stuff, can I be still and connected to intuition and insight and then live from it? Things that are always going to be beyond your control, and thought may not be able to see it, but intuition can. And so how do you refine intuition? How do you look at entrepreneurship as a process of self-discovery and refining intuition to find your true purpose and meaning in life?
Is just so I get a better understanding of what intuition is the feeling of fight or flight. Does that happen on the intuition level, or is that one of the...
No, that's usually a mind fuck. It's tied to story. And the thing about this is, for most people, is that fear is usually there as an emotion. Fear is typically there to keep desire in check.
Fear is there to keep desire.
So something wants, hey, I want this, but I'm afraid of this, and so that keeps, and it's this tension that most people live on to kind of develop the energy system.
Right.
Versus, like this woman that you're dating right now, this one woman, is she the one?
Probably.
How do you know she's the one or not?
Yeah, intuition.
Yeah, you just know without knowing how you know. It's not a rational decision, and you're just kind of exploring it, and then you're testing it. Versus some people, they just see it and they go, this is it. So this guy that's coming to see me tomorrow, Adrian, I just spent like a day with him. He's like, hey, my next project, I'm doing this. I told him what I'm going to next tomorrow, I'm going to help you with this. I'm like, hey, you don't even know, but I know enough. This is it.
Yeah.
And so if you look at any kind of entrepreneur, if you think about it, just literally from a thinking about it perspective, there's a difference between, say, playing soccer kind of on the friendly soccer pitch versus being in the World Cup. When you're in the World Cup, every little decision, if you have to think, when you're on the field, lining up for that kick, if you have to think about it, you're going to lose. And so how do you kind of live from that kind of knowing?
If I wanted to find out which stage I'm at personally, like let's say someone watching, or I want to find out like 2 weeks from now, maybe I've made progress, what are some questions that I ask myself? Or
well,
what is
it's not really a question. It's a state, looking at state of being. All of your past experiences from when you were born to today are encoded in your physiology in some way.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
All of my past experiences from when I was born to today are encoded in my physiology in some way. Now, if you started speaking Swiss German to me, a lot of it I'd be like, huh? If I started speaking Chinese to you, 我现在讲国语的话，你听得懂吗?
Yeah.
So what's actually happening when we're speaking English? So it turns out language and communication is actually a physiology to physiology experience. Right? Because what's happening is I'm holding my physiology in a certain state. In order for you to understand me, you actually have to match my energy.
Right.
If I shift a little, like, do you want some more, you going to finish the fries? Or they got the extra ketchup here. You can, that changes the quality of the intersubjective. And so what's actually happening when we're speaking is I'm holding my physiology in a certain state. You're actually matching my energy, and then I'm traversing my embodied knowing. You're tracking me and matching me here. And then when I get into something where you have the limits of your understanding, you're going to have a question or whatever. And what happens when you ask a question is you disconnect from this, you look away, and you're like, does that make sense? Yeah, and then you come back. And so what's happening is you're still tied to the symbols versus being able to speak from this. And you're going to notice if we agree to maintain eye contact and speak, we can both hear the coffee machine going and all this other stuff. But when we maintain eye contact and speak, you can be aware of all this. You can be aware of how you're feeling in terms of your breathing and everything, but you have no access to conceptual knowledge. Now you're thought. And so just by watching you, I can literally see you go into thought. And if we agree to maintain eye contact and speak, I'm going to hit you pretty hard with this, is you can speak from your heart, but you can't speak from your head.
Huh. I remember that.
There you go again. Yeah. Right. Right. And so can you, like you, especially your girlfriend and all the people that you talk to, can you speak to them from this? And for you, it'll be very difficult. And then the question is why?
What? You're saying for me it's going to be difficult, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm not. Is that something that I could be training?
Well, explore it. Because again, just like going to the bathroom, the psychology may be different, but the physiological processes are similar.
And this reminds me of an experiment or something that you've taught me that very first day when we met and we went for sushi. Yeah, it's also hard to go back. Can you go back in memory and talk about concepts while remaining eye contact?
Well, it's knowing, where we're at and what are you trying to say and what's the objective of every, if you can be still, what is the objective of everything that you're saying? So right now, I'm sharing this with you because I care about you, we're friends, I'd like to see you succeed, and I'm just kind of imparting with you some of the things that I know and some of the research that I have right now as well too, right? And so I know the force motivating the action. And if it's like, oh, well, what about this, or what about that, etc. Hey, what did you think of the latest Trump situation, or did you see Saturday Night Live last week, or whatever, that's, how does that relate to this, and what is this moving towards? And so part of engaging with another person, but then at a more subtle level, the sound of the trumpet, the sounds that are happening here, what's this saying in relation to this? And as I'm trying to do something, how is this responding? It's the same thing I'm doing here, but this is a lot more subtle.
Yeah. How is presence and consciousness related? Are they one and the same, or?
Well, presence is how you're processing the moment. Consciousness is just what you're aware of, right? And so if I talk to you like this feels a certain way, but as I'm speaking to you, I can hear the other conversations that are going on around. Someone just clapped or something. There's a sound of a glass and everything. There's all of this stuff that's happening here. And presence is this. The trumpet starting up again. Versus, when is your next meet? Where's your girlfriend staying? And if I talk to you like this, it's like, yeah. Was the food okay? I mean, I guess you didn't like they're kind of dry, huh? So when I talk to you like this is kind of like small talk type stuff. Right. And if you look at the physiology and the way that's happening, it feels very different than someone just said it's not just me and laughed. Someone just coughed as well.
Stage 4. What's stage 5?
Special abilities. And so just like this, there's a process, if you look at Tibet and all these other places, of direct transmission. And so what happens is certain people have special abilities, and then what happens is a monk that has kind of cleared will go, say, hey, and then they'll sit, and then what'll happen is because of this resonant property, is that the person will just, like I was just doing with you, just go into a different state, and then the other person would then absorb that and go, oh, okay, and then be aware of what's going on here. Okay, I know what this is now. And then weird things will start happening, and then they'll explain it through, and I'll say, okay, thank you. And then they'll go to the next one. And so it's almost like imprinting a physiological state on another person. And so things like clairvoyance, different types of knowing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, energy healing, there are all of these other abilities, and that's human technology. And so part of the reason why we go around the world is we just kind of identify these kind of people and then research them. What's going on with their physiologies when they're doing their thing. And what happens though, for some people, like you have some interesting abilities too, and you have the energy, the fact that, I can go deep and you can kind of track me means that your discipline has done a lot on your inner work. And so, related to all of this stuff, because of the discipline, what happens for most people that are in thought, and the reason why you're focused the way that you are, is that you can think of your physiology. Well, what happens is when people are developing, energy is a limited resource. And so what happens is this bird that just landed here, and by being aware of all of this other stuff, I shut all of that stuff down so I can take my whole dynamic range and just focus on that one thing. And so what's happening is I'm stretching the energetic capacity of the physiology, but it's focused on one thing, and you do that very well. That's why the blinders and all this other stuff and the projects, and you're just going to do these 3 things and keep my life simple and focused so that I can apply my full energy there. Now, once I blow all this away and reconnect to the innate joy of being, energy is no longer a problem because I'm comparing every moment with death. Every little thing that I do, my life depends on it. When do I get up to move? What's the next thing that I do? My whole life depended on it, as if you're, say, in the trenches during World War I. But if you are consciously aware of every little thing, then energy is no longer an issue. The other analogy of this is, as I'm sitting here aware of all the things that are happening, is that if we were both hunters in the Amazon with spears, when a hunter's in the Amazon, the smells, every tree, every rustle, every bird caw is telling the experienced hunter what's happening in the forest. And the mythology is it's the hunter and the animal that they're hunting. Their spirits are negotiating where the kill is going to take place. Right? That's the mythology of it. If you bring someone that grew up in Manhattan and you put them in that very same jungle, they're just like, hey, where's the pizza, man? It's like Central Park, right? And they're just oblivious to all of this other stuff.
Well, would there be a way for me to, in absence of that project, to understand like what's the one thing that's going to resonate the most with my energy?
Well, arguably, you're not there yet.
Yep.
Physiologically speaking. So just
I'm in the process right now.
yeah, so look at it and just be aware of that. And so what we're trying to do with our fund is work with entrepreneurs that recognize that. And then it's really looking at metaphysically speaking, how and why are things happening the way they are, right? Now the issue for me, it's very subtle. I much prefer working with like a low 3 person than a high 2 person. Because a high 2 person, remember stage 1 is I've developed the energy. Stage 2 is I'm kicking all of my energy into this one thing. And so when you're kicking your energy all into one thing, it's still, for those people, it's still me that has to do something. And it's my beliefs that are driving me. And those people are kind of a pain in the ass to deal with because they're high energy and they're hypersensitive, right? Their whole energy system ties to their project. They're just going to talk about their project, and anything that you say, they're going to fold into their project. They're very self-centered in that way. And if you start trying to chop on that, they're going to get violently defensive on it because it's as if you're attacking, if I'm a scientist and my life's work is, say, I don't know, quantum theory of consciousness, and you start chopping on my life's work theory, I'm going to lash back out at you as hard as I can, right? Or I'm going to try to refute that and everything. And those people are kind of a pain in the ass. You have to be hypersensitive. It's like brain surgery. You have to be really delicate with those people. Versus, as I'm speaking to you, there's the sound of the dishes, some bird just chirped, and the 2 people sitting behind you just walked out. Can we stay grounded here? And then as you're doing something, how is the reality playing out? Don't listen to me, listen to this.
Yeah.
What are you trying to do, and how is the reality responding in relation to that? And helping coach people through that, because ultimately all roads lead to Rome. And then metaphysically speaking, what happens is that if you're on the path of presence, so the 2 birds that just flew by and all of this other stuff, is that when you start moving off track, reality starts by kind of going like this. And if you don't listen, it kind of goes like this. And if you still don't listen, it kind of shakes you up. And so it's more of a metaphysical question of what are you trying to do? The outer reflects the inner, which is more of an Eastern practice. And it's really looking at what's trying to do something and why are things not jiving. And for especially high stage 3 people, they're, what within me, right? And it's not a him, I'm never going to work with him again, he's an asshole, it's because of this, it's not me, it's because of this. They can own up to their responsibility, and then we can use the development of their company as a process of personal development. And so that's the huge value. Entrepreneurship is very much, out of stage one. Part of it is, okay, you can do it, dealing with the insecurities around all of that for them to have the confidence, but then not get too cocky, and it's not you, it's the bigger forces. And it's that bridge from stage 2 to stage 3. A PhD does that too. Entrepreneur, artists trying to find their voice. All of that is that.
Are there some exercises or materials or tools or anything that helps in to explore yourself?
Well, I've given you a bunch right now. And so the key thing for you is when are you present and when you're in thought, and then just to know when you shift state. Like I'm speaking to you like this, we're aware of all this, versus, shoot, it's 5, oh shoot, I have a meeting with the dean. Actually, I literally have a meeting with the dean right now. And so there's this, which feels very different, right? And so knowing when you shift state is one thing. The other is you'll notice for you, because we know how the hardware works, is when I ask you to be aware of all this, you can actually be aware of all this, and you can be aware of how you're breathing and how your body feels right now too. And you're gonna, especially your breath. And if I ask you to breathe deeply from your belly rather than your chest, and try to feel angry at the same time, difficult. And so your breath relates to your emotional state.
Absolutely.
And you're gonna notice that when you go into thought, you're gonna lose awareness to breath.
Yeah, I'll try that.
Yeah, and so what is, once you're not aware of breath, you're basically, your emotional state can go anywhere. It's going to tie to your stories versus staying grounded and centered here.
That's something I've experienced a lot in the past. Like whenever I try to bring myself back to center,
Yeah.
I always use my breath, and it's super it takes me 5 breaths or whatever,
Yeah.
and I'm at 80% back to where I need to be.
And so again, for you, it's can you live from presence? And it's kind of like surfing. So it's like, hey, yeah, oh no, I fell off, and then just, are you still alive? Yes. Is it still good to be alive? Yes. And then just wait for the next wave, and then just kind of keep rolling with it.
After talking to Gino yesterday, it got me thinking, what are the moments that I feel present? When I talk about why I've decluttered to just 64 things, I talk about this moment when I thought a lot about what makes me happy. And I guess to some degree, being happy and being in the moment, being present, those might be the same thing. These moments might be very connected or at least correlated. My only job I had in the corporate world in investment banking, I saw a lot of people that were chasing the wrong things in life, at least in my value system. So I saw them chasing money, but I didn't really know what to do with that money. So it got me thinking, what are the moments where I feel complete and happy and I'm just enjoying life and I'm having fun. So I started observing myself, and this lasted probably for the better part of 6 months, where every time I felt happy or fortunate and grateful, I observed myself and I asked myself, what was it that triggered that feeling? What was it that caused this? And what I realized was it was learning. And so once I discovered that, it became super easy for me to optimize everything in my life for that. Because I also realized that one of the most creative problem-solving areas in my life was building companies. Getting from an idea that I had at the bar last night to something that does 1 million, and 1 million could be $1 million, it could be 1 million packages shipped, it could be 1 million users on the platform. Going through that process is what really fascinates me and what really drives me in life and makes me present. I looked it up recently. It was September 6th, a Tuesday morning in 2016, when I got up one morning and I asked myself, why do I still own a place? I was gonna go on another trip, and I had really only come back to Zurich to be in my apartment, which didn't make any sense to me. Why would I be there for an apartment? An apartment should be there to be there for me and provide value to me, not the other way around. So in that sense, this moment of clarity and presence and realizing what makes me happy and what are the moments that I get the most value from also led to me deciding to give up on a lot of the materialistic stuff that was in my life. It was a very powerful moment, and so that's why I'm so passionate about exploring this further and figuring out if there's more areas in my life where I can maybe accelerate the process of finding clarity. I'm excited for what's coming. I'm excited to hear more from Gino on how to further elevate my state of presence and consciousness. I'd be very curious to hear from you. What is it that makes you extremely happy? When do you feel present? When do you feel conscious? Let me know in the comments or direct message, and I'll share it in a future episode, or I'll at least try it myself. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.